Coming up in a newscast, Seoul and Pyongyang exchanged warning shots in the West Sea after a North Korean merchant ship violated the maritime border. This comes amid heightened tensions on the peninsula as the regime continues launching provocations, including missile tests. The founder of Kakao Corporation was grilled in Parliament over the recent blackout of services. He apologized and vowed to consider all possible measures to compensate those affected by the incident. The civilian advisor to the government task force on the pandemic highlights the importance of close monitoring, especially in ERs, to be fully prepared for a possible twindemic. The official also believes indoor mask mandates should remain for the rest of the year. Hope your week's off to a smooth start. I'm Daniel Che here to bring the latest. Let us begin with the top story at this hour. Seoul and Pyongyang exchanged warning shots off the west coast after a North Korean merchant ship crossed a disputed maritime border for the first time in more than half a decade. South Korea said the artillery fired by the regime was a provocation that violates the 2018 military agreement. Bae Eun-ji starts us off.
At about 3:42 a.m. on Monday, a North Korean merchant ship briefly crossed our northern limit line in waters west of the Korean peninsula. South Korea's Joint Chiefs of Staff announced that the ship crossed over about 27 kilometers northwest of its Paekmyeong-do island. An official from the JCS said the ship came as far as 3.3 kilometers south of the de facto border. This is the first time since January 2017 that a merchant ship from the north has crossed the maritime border. In response, South Korea's military sent numerous warning messages and then fired warning shots before the ship retreated and headed toward China at about 4:20 a.m. Then, at about 5:14 a.m., the North fired 10 shells from multiple rocket launchers, according to South Korea's JCS. The North's military also said in a statement on Monday morning that it fired 10 artillery shells, claiming that a South Korean Navy ship intruded on its western sea border as well. Seoul's military called the North's claims absurd, as it had conducted normal operations regarding the merchant ship's border intrusion. It also called the North's latest move a provocation, as the artillery shells fired landed in maritime buffer zones set by an inter-Korean military agreement in 2018 to reduce military tensions.
North Korea firing artillery rounds in response to a normal operation by our military after a North Korean merchant ship crossed the NLL is clearly a provocation and a violation of the September 19th military agreement. We repeatedly urge North Korea to immediately halt its absurd claims and provocations that harm peace and stability on the Korean peninsula, as well as the international community.
The disputed maritime boundary in waters off the Korean peninsula has been a source of tense military incidents between the two Koreas, as Pyongyang has refused to acknowledge the northern limit line as its maritime border. Bae Eun-ji, Arirang News.
Moving on to other stories now, Seoul plans to develop ties further with Beijing, where Xi Jinping enters his third term in office. How will the Chinese leader's continued rule affect bilateral relations? Kim Beom-su provides a deeper analysis.
Seoul will continue to pursue healthier and more mature South Korea-China relations under Xi Jinping's third leadership term, based on the spirit of mutual respect and reciprocity. This is according to a senior official from South Korea's Foreign Ministry on Monday, in response to Xi's re-election over the weekend. They added Seoul is also considering sending an official congratulatory message to Beijing, as the South Korean government had done in 2012 and 2017. With a firmer grip on China, Xi has picked a top governing body packed with his loyalists, meaning the latest leadership reshuffle is likely to put a greater weight on relations with Washington. The growing U.S China rivalry in various fields such as technology may sandwich South Korea between the two, especially following efforts from the Biden administration to keep China in check. The Taiwan issue can also be a challenging variable for Seoul-Beijing ties if tensions escalate in the region.
South Korea's diplomatic position has narrowed and is one step closer to the U.S.
That doesn't mean the Yoon administration has given up on ties with China, but it's a time when more wisdom is needed in making foreign policy towards China.
Despite such global challenges, South Korea and China are on the same page when it comes to maintaining peace on the Korean peninsula. Experts say Seoul can secure a diplomatic space with Beijing, especially ahead of mounting fears that North Korea is on the verge of conducting a nuclear test. They added the two countries could lay the foundation for positive ties if the leaders manage to hold their first in-person talks on the sidelines of the G20 Indonesia next month. Kim Beom-su, Arirang News.
The nation's top diplomat believes Japan may be moving to compensate Korean victims of wartime forced labor. During a regular parliamentary audit on Monday, Park Jin pointed out that Tokyo appears willing to talk and resolve the issue. The foreign ministry is continuously urging a sincere response and is communicating with the country to devise reasonable solutions. Having met with some of the victims, the official delivered their request to Japan. Park vows to work on coming up with the best possible resolution acceptable by the victims, their families, and the Korean people. China reported an on-year economic growth of 3.9% in Q3, while it beat market expectations with a Reuters poll giving 3.4. It's still well below the Communist state's official target of 5.5. According to China's National Bureau of Statistics, last quarter's GDP expanded to 87 trillion yuan, a little over $12 trillion. Growth was higher than Q2 when it came to just 0.4%. Beijing claims to be rebounding thanks in part to COVID-19 policies. However, many widely blame lockdowns for much of China's economic difficulties. With Xi Jinping staying at the helm, Washington-Beijing tensions are expected to grow over access to advanced tech, that is. This is also expected to deal a blow to South Korean chip makers. They have plants in China, and that country is their largest export destination. Shin provides a glimpse of what to expect.
On Sunday, Chinese President Xi Jinping secured his third term as leader. In his opening speech at the Communist Party Congress, President Xi emphasized that his goal is to accelerate China's technological self-reliance and win the battle in the key technologies. South Korea's chip industry is expected to be hit hard by the rising tensions between China and the U.S. because semiconductors are Korea's biggest export to China. In September, overall exports to China amounted to $13.4 billion, with chips taking up 30% of the total. South Korea recorded trade deficits with China in the 4 months from May to August. There are risks coming from the U.S. side as well, which is trying to restrict China's access to advanced chip-making equipment, which is used in China by South Korean firms Samsung Electronics and SK Hynix at their local plants. They've been granted some reprieve by the U.S., though, with the Biden administration giving them an exemption from those rules so they can continue to bring advanced American equipment into China for 1 year. After that, however, things will get tough considering the massive amounts they've invested in China. An expert points out that President Xi's third term won't impact South Korean chip makers in the short term. Rather, the concern is the changing structure of the industry in the future.
President Xi's third term will not have a huge effect on South Korea's chip industry immediately. President Xi committed to boosting China's chip industry several years ago. His third term will be about pushing China to increase its self-sufficiency in chips.
He forecasts that in the long term, South Korea's chip-making system will change so that it takes part in both front-end and back-end manufacturing instead of only certain parts of the process. Shin Arirang News.
The government's emergency bond buying measures seem to have eased some concerns about the corporate bond market here in the nation. Fears of a liquidity crunch had been sparked by a default on Gangwon-do province's project financing for Legoland construction. Kim Ji-yeon has the full story.
South Korea's benchmark Kospi closed above 22.36 on Monday, climbing by around 1% compared to its previous session, according to the Korea Exchange. At one point during midday trading, it soared to the 22.50 level as market jitters have somewhat subsided following the Ministry of Economy and Finance announcement Sunday to inject an additional $34.8 billion worth of liquidity. Concerns of a credit crunch in the corporate debt market were sparked by a bankruptcy application earlier this month by Iwon Jae-cha, a special purpose company established by the Gangwon-jungdo Development Corporation to fund the construction of the Legoland theme park and resort in the region. The theme park opened in May this year. The company at first missed a debt payment of nearly $142.5 million, stoking fears of a credit crunch, making it tougher for other businesses to borrow money. South Korean shares have also rallied following indications the U.S. Federal Reserve may slow the pace of its tightening cycle later this year from another 75 basis point rate hike for smaller increments. The Fed had raised key interest rates by 75 basis points for 3 consecutive times so far this year, with the benchmark rate now at a target range of 3% to 3.25%. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
A mixed bag for Hyundai Motor in the third quarter. The carmaker's net profit fell more than 5% on year, coming in at 1.41 trillion won, or about $980 million. The Korean auto giant had to set aside provisions to pay for costs related to quality issues with the Theta 2 engine. However, it beat market expectations with Q3 revenue, notching a quarterly record high of 37.7 trillion won, or about $26 billion, up over 30% compared to 2021. Hyundai forecasts overall sales this year of a little over 4 million vehicles, 7% lower than its previous estimate, largely due to continued supply chain disruptions. A Korean Air passenger plane on Sunday overshot the runway while attempting to land at Cebu International Airport in the Philippines. The airline said no one on board was injured. According to the company, the Air Airbus A330 prior to the accident had already made 2 attempts to land in bad weather. According to the Aviation Herald, which publishes reports of incidents in commercial aviation, the aircraft suffered substantial damage. The founder of Kakao was in the hot seat at the National Assembly over the recent blackout of services. As it affected many businesses, he vowed to consider all possible measures to compensate them properly. Lee Kyung-eun tells us more.
The founder and former chairman of Kakao Corporation, Kim Beom-su, bowed his head, apologizing for what's been called a digital blackout caused by the tech giant's inability to swiftly restore its services following a fire at a data center 9 days ago.
I sincerely apologize for causing you inconvenience in using our services.
To business users, the disruptions meant more than just inconvenience, but financial losses. Especially for taxi drivers and local shops, they rely on the platform to reach their customers. Kakao is currently compensating the affected businesses based on the terms of the contract, like extending paid memberships or returning a certain period of the subscription fee in cash. But lawmakers call for more than what's written in the terms.
Would you also consider giving small business owners a fixed amount of universal compensation too?
I will consider all possible measures and do my utmost to help the affected businesses.
But the question is how to compensate those who use free services, namely the messaging app Kakao Talk and Tom Email, like freelancers, the self-employed, and local shops, which use these platforms to receive proposals and reservations.
So far, there are no cases for us to refer to in other countries where compensation has been paid for free services. But we are taking damage reports and will come up with a compensation scheme.
Regarding Kim's rather lukewarm stance, lawmakers call for bold action.
Kakao was able to grow in the beginning because of the people who came for the free services. I urge Kakao to take bold action to compensate them.
The CEO of SKCNC, which manages the data center where the fire broke out, vowed his company's cooperation in paying compensation too. Lee Kyung-eun, Arirang News.
And as we speak, the Parliament's audit session just resumed. SK Group Chair Che Tae-won is in attendance as a witness, reversing his previous stance that he had an overseas forum to attend. Lawmakers are likely to ask him to take responsibility for the fire at the building being managed by SK CNC. President Yoon ordered special measures against the increasing rate of online drug trafficking among young people in South Korea. At Monday's weekly meeting with the Prime Minister, the South Korean leader stressed the need for a war on drugs to prevent the problem from becoming a national risk beyond the point where it's manageable. Preparations are underway for a pan-governmental anti-drug plan for drug crime prevention and rehabilitation. The number of drug offenses among teens tripled last year from 2018, and those among people in the 20s have more than doubled. Authorities warned of a potential surge in seasonal viruses among children this winter. Without antibodies, infants born during the pandemic could be at serious risk. Children with respiratory symptoms must be taken directly to specialists or the ER instead of having for coronavirus test results. Kim Beom-su brings the updates.
With flu season coming up, South Korean health authorities have stressed the importance of a medical response system for infants and children. They also warn that children could be at risk of contracting other respiratory viruses this winter too, such as metapneumovirus and RS. Any children that do show symptoms are now able to be taken directly to a respiratory medical facility or pediatrics for immediate treatment instead of having to wait for a PCR test result. While adults may have been exposed to them without realizing it, viruses such as these can be harmful to infants. And because of social distancing, children born during the pandemic are unlikely to have antibodies to fight against them. When asked when the indoor mask mandate will be lifted, the same official said that it's still premature to discuss it. He said even if the indoor mask mandate was to be lifted, they would still need to be worn for a while on public transport and in medical facilities, even after the pandemic is declared over by the WHO. Meanwhile, South Korea saw 14,302 new cases of COVID-19 on Monday. 226 severe cases were reported and 10 additional deaths. Kim Jong-sil, Arirang News.
Over in the UK, Rishi Sunak is the frontrunner to become the country's next prime minister. The former Treasury chief becomes a strong favorite as ex-PM Boris Johnson pulled out of the Conservative Party leadership contest. This follows the resignation of Liz Truss after 45 days in office that were marked by political turmoil and economic concerns. The 42-year-old Sunak is the only candidate that secured the support of more than 100 Tories. That's the number of backers needed to run in the election. House of Commons leader Penny Mordaunt is aiming to secure enough support to go head-to-head with Sunak before nominations close. Elsewhere around the world, Russian missile attacks destroyed apartment blocks in the southern part of Ukraine. No fatalities, but many were injured by the explosions at night. While continuing such acts, Moscow accused Kyiv of planning to detonate a radioactive dirty bomb. Ji-young has the latest.
In the southern Ukrainian port city Mykolaiv, residential buildings were destroyed by what residents said were very loud blasts. Although there were no deaths reported, the city's mayor said Sunday on the Telegram messaging app that Russian missile attacks wiped out the top floor of a residential building.
I was sleeping right here when I heard a loud explosion. After the first blast, I tried to get out, but the door was stuck. After a minute or two, there was a second loud blast. Our door was blown into the corridor.
The Russian attack using S-300 missiles caused injuries as debris was propelled across the plaza and into neighboring buildings.
This is the annihilation of the Ukrainian people, and Russia must be held accountable for this, a criminal case for the crimes they're committing.
Meanwhile, Russia has accused Ukraine of planning to detonate a radioactive dirty bomb. Moscow's defense minister Sergei Shoigu told his U.S., British, French, and Turkish counterparts over the phone that Ukraine could escalate the conflict and then accuse Moscow of using weapons of mass destruction. However, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said only Russia is capable of using nuclear weapons in Europe.
If Russia calls and says that Ukraine is allegedly preparing something, it means only one thing. Russia has already prepared all this. I believe that now the world should react as harshly as possible.
He also asked for more support from the West amid Russia's nuclear threats. The White House said that Shoigu's claim is, quote, transparently false, and it was also rejected by the Pentagon. 엄지영, Arirang News.
Moving on to other stories now, companies from different sectors are actively working together to come up with the future of air transportation. Various industries are collaborating for faster development in hopes of taking the market first. Jung Eun-ju sheds light on the efforts.
Although this may look like an ordinary car at first glance, it's actually a type of air transportation that can carry up to 6 people. A few different companies from various industries are involved in its development. KT operates the satellites that provide the 6G communication network necessary for air traffic. Incheon International Airport Corporation laid the groundwork to develop the aviation infrastructure, while Korean Air was tasked with developing the flight control system. The vehicle itself is made by Hyundai Motor Group.
We went through share exchange transaction for mutually responsible collaboration and business alliance. This allows us to provide optimized connected car service to customers.
In response, SK Telecom and Hanwha Systems have formed a consortium to develop a 4-engine vertical takeoff and landing aircraft. Demonstration flights are planned for next year. Companies with expertise in various fields collaborate in this way, as it is difficult for one company alone to develop the required technology.
This flight service can't be achieved alone. It requires collaboration from construction companies, airports, and regulatory agencies.
Kakao Mobility and LGU Plus are developing an urban air mobile that resembles large drones but would be significantly quieter. Lotte Group, mainly with its affiliate companies, has taken on the challenge as well to develop air transportation by developing a 5-seater aircraft that looks like a helicopter. The global urban air mobility market is expected to reach $1.5 trillion by 2040, and so a number of companies are actively looking to make the most of the opportunities. Jung Eun-ju, Arirang News.
Tomorrow, South Korea will have another chilly start to the morning with temperatures colder than today. Lows in Seoul will plummet to 5 degrees Celsius. Keep in mind that frigid wind chills will make conditions feel about 2 degrees lower than the actual readings. And big contrast in daily temperatures are expected for the time being. Most regions will see wide gaps of at least 10 degrees or more tomorrow. And thankfully, we'll have no worries about fine dust. Air quality will stand in the normal to good category nationwide. Eastern regions will see showers continuing into early tomorrow morning. The coastlines of Gangwon-do and Gyeongsang-buk-do provinces will see 10 to 50 millimeters of rainfall. Regions with higher elevations will see rain turning into snow. Inland regions will see morning lows in single figures. Chuncheon will be starting off cold at 3 degrees. Daily highs in Seoul will reach 17, Gwangju 18, Gyeongju will be topping out at 16 degrees. Conditions will return to the seasonal norms on Wednesday afternoon. On Friday, Gangwon-do province will see another round of brief showers. That's all for now, and here are the weather conditions around the world.
And that's all from us. As always, thank you for watching.
안아주면 안 잡아먹지 호랑이가 쫓아온다